Somebody weighed 250 pounds, sat on the bench, and they broke the bench.
Oh, shit.
So I'm gonna try to fix it.
Oh, no, fix it, yeah.
Yeah, but it worked out good last night,
Cool,
man. Thanks,
you guys had a
dude.
good time, it's good, man.
Yeah, it was cool. Fire, you know?
Hey, man, you only live once, man.
I hear
you.
you.
Just enjoy yourself and just have fun, man.
That's it.
Heck yeah. I'll let you guys do your thing.
Cool, brother. Thanks, man.
Bye.
I feel like having gone through all the training and all my experiences in the military, I can take those experiences and kind of bring that into my work. It's like, I know what it feels like to free fall. And I know what it feels like to dive, you know, in pitch black water where you can't see your buddy. And somehow I'm able to connect to those experiences while I'm doing the work that I do. There's this kind of hooking in, and then there's like a certain information that can be exchanged through that.
The only question I hate when people ask is like, have you ever shot and killed somebody? It's like, how the fuck do you answer a question like that? And I've had, on 2 different occasions, somebody asked me that. I was just like, really? You know, does your sister like to take it in the ass?
It was in 2009, so we're really training the local military and the local police forces to kind of handle their own more.
What was that like?
We were filming downtown Los Angeles. It was about zombies and stuff like that. And they had me shooting semi-rounds.
I'm just trying to think how I can phrase it.
They handed me an AK-47, and it was literally shooting flames out and it was making a sound like a real gun. And there was, I don't necessarily say it caused a traumatic experience, but it definitely brought me back to being in combat. There was for maybe a split second that
I feel like,
you know, okay, you're firing weapons at people.
in the U.S., people can be very, there's a certain amount of nationalism, and people can be very patriotic and really believe in their country. And I think it was a little frustrating to see that there wasn't as much of that.
When I first came into the Marine Corps, I was actually going to school as a theater major. It was super spur of the moment. It sort of surprised because I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't ask my parents about it, you know, I just went and did it.
They were recruiting junior national champions from boxing, wrestling, judo, and taekwondo, all combative sports, thinking if you're a fighter, then you'll be a good soldier, which is probably a good idea, which is probably smart.
It didn't come from any deep-seated feelings of patriotism or sense of duty necessarily. I just wanted to understand what that life was all about.
I come from a long line of men who served. My grandfather, my father's father, told me that the Perrys go and fight, boy. The Perrys join, and we fight. At 18, when I swore in, at 18, don't really know what you're going to, at least I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I didn't know. How old are you, Mariah?
I'm 34.
Okay. Well, you know what you're doing then.
Hi, Mariah.
Connie.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you so much for letting us screen Full Burn, which we thought would be a very interesting thing to do at this moment. So thank you. And just a word to the audience, Mariah and I will talk a little bit, but I would encourage you all to use chat for the questions. And we will be able to take questions kind of as soon as they start rolling in. But I thought it would be good to maybe start with, Full Burn was made in 2014. It was shown, I think, first and made in LA, the Hammer's Biennial exhibition. And but I was realizing watching it now, as I was saying to you earlier, that in the context of where we are at this moment, I think it has such incredible and renewed urgency sort of in resonance, thinking about this the militarization of the police and what I think of as this, broader kind of cultural problem of not only kind of systemic violence, but how that impacts, the construction of masculinity in the culture. And so talk a little bit, I guess, about what how you initially, what led you to make the film in the first place. And I know part of it came from the work that you were doing at the time, but sort of how you got to these guys in the first place.
Yeah. So should I tell the story about being on set and that's how I met
I think
them?
you should definitely tell the story.
Okay. So in 2014 or 2013, I guess, but all through grad school and at, like the years following grad school, I worked doing B-roll, behind the scenes video shooting for magazine cover shoots. And it was usually for like Men's Health. And this one that I'm about to talk about was for Newsweek, but it was mostly for these like really masculine magazines. My job was to like slow pan over perfect abs pretty much. So, and I never thought it would like infiltrate my work. I thought it was just like a way of supporting my life while I worked on my own stuff. But there was one shoot that I was on for Newsweek that was Charlie Sheen, and he was supposed to be set on fire. And that's where I met these stunt guys. And I kind of came up with an idea for the film like on the spot. On the set, there's like all these sort of macho dynamics, and it's like vying for who's like top dog on the set. So there's Charlie Sheen like showing up late, and everybody kind of kissing his ass because he's a celebrity. But then he steps on set and is sort of like objectified by the cameraman or the photographer who's like telling him how to pose. And then there's like weird man banter about like surfing or I don't know, drinking or and then there was a writer who came in who then sort of like took up a lot of space talking about himself. So there's all these like dynamics of like who the alpha was. And in the meantime, there was the stunt team that was getting this guy ready to be set on fire. And I remember sitting there and watching him get the gel put on him. So he was wearing like a wetsuit basically and a hood. And then they gelled him up with this fire retardant gel.
Which is in the film, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's happening in the film. And there's like, first of all, he had this team of guys who were really like on top of it, and they were like rubbing his body with this gel, and it was like they were so meticulous and like taking all this care, but it was also this like really masculine act. And while I was watching him do that, the producer was like, "Did you know that guy just came back from a tour in Iraq and a tour in Afghanistan, and he's a special ops Marine?" And I was like, this is what he's doing. And then right after I found that out, he walked on the set and got lit on fire, and basically blew all the other guys' macho-ness away without even trying. So yeah, there was something about like the posturing of masculinity, like relationship to the camera, but then also like this other form of masculinity that was like more authentic in some way. And also like this vulnerability based on like the care that the team was taking. Yeah, so that's kind of how I came to that project. But yeah, in that moment I was like, oh, I just want to interview that guy, hear what he has to say about it, and have just watch him get ready and get set on fire. And then that kind of got a little bit perverted through the course of making the film, but yeah.
And so you were told that he was a vet, right? Yeah. And that's how you got interested in finding other guys like that, or after you interviewed him, pursuing the other guys?
Well, I was trying to get him to be in the film, and I met him, and then he went away to like shoot a film for something like 8 months or something like that. And so I had this film in my head that was just one film, a single channel, just this one guy, but I couldn't make it. So in the interim, I just started interviewing other people or like seeking out other perspectives. And that's the first guy I met with was the masseuse. He does Rolfing, just to kind of get an idea of, what it's like to be a special ops Marine and why you would choose to set yourself on fire after coming home from a war zone. And then after I interviewed him, I interviewed Frank, who was the motorcycle guy, and I was put in touch with another guy. So those guys I was interviewing mostly for research, And then the initial guy came back that I wanted to film, and we filmed pretty close to actually the opening of Made in LA.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
And so I was asking you a little bit about how you were able to draw them out, because they seem so willing. They seem both kind of self-conscious and in sort of denial about what it is that they do and its relationship to violence, but also like really willing to talk about it. So I'm curious how you were able to draw that out.
Well, actually, I lifted some questions from a Werner Herzog film called The Great Ecstasy of the Sculptor Steiner.
Mm-hmm.
So that film's about a Olympic ski jumper who, is like an Olympic champion. And he interviews him about, his fear of, have you ever been afraid of dying? Just sort of like the extreme nature of his sport. And I don't remember the exact questions, but I picked like 5 questions that were sort of based on those questions that were really just related to sort of like facts about being a Marine.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't ask them any questions about any specifics about what they had done. A lot of them were like, I'm not going to talk about that. And I was like, that's fine. I don't want to know. And then some of them maybe did talk a little bit about it, but I think they were maybe expecting me to like ask the sort of obvious leftist questions of,
Yeah.
Are you like a killing machine or something like that? And,
right.
But instead of it's like, what are the similarities between being a stuntman and being a special ops Marine? And
right.
Yeah.
You're able to draw out such vulnerability from them. I mean, that's I think one of the really surprising things about the film. And I know you said to me the other day that we were talking about the protests, and you mentioned walking by one of the, I forget if it was police or National Guard guys, and just remarking on how young they are, and feeling some kind of just sensing the vulnerability in those kids who are essentially already in the military. And I think you talked to a few of them, right? Tried to engage with them.
I wasn't trying to actually. I was in one of the marches, and it was the National Guard I was talking about. They were like 18. I mean, I said they were 17, but they're probably not. They're probably 18.
Yeah, probably.
And they're holding these giant machine guns.
Yeah.
And one of them, and a lot of them were people of color. Like, it was definitely a pretty diverse, very young group of men. Mm-hmm. And one of them was like, "Thank you for standing up for what's right." And I was just like, this is just so messed up, Right. Exactly. But that was a question of vulnerability. Yeah, I mean, I also like was thinking about labor a lot when I was making that film, and mm-hmm. like how these men's bodies are like, I guess, cogs in a capitalist imperialist machine. So they're like pushing this imperialist capitalist ideology forward, both as soldiers and as stuntmen in Hollywood, mm-hmm. and like risking their lives in both senses. But a lot of them weren't particularly, didn't particularly subscribe to that ideology. So yeah, it was like grunt workers. Mm-hmm. So I was interested in that, like how the body gets sort of consumed, or how their bodies specifically get consumed.
Yeah.
By capitalism.
Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit about, I mean, there is such a physicality in the film, I think, and often in your work, but in this one in particular that, has to do with, I mean, I want to ask you about your incorporation of your own body, which is something that always happens in your work, but also just the sort of presence of their bodies, but even I was thinking about that scene where it goes throughout, where he's sort of polishing the motorcycle or whatever, the strange body of the muscularity of that machine, and the way the machine is sort of this weird phallic weapon. And I mean, and that's the way he's kind of stroking it. The whole thing is so problematic, you know, and disturbing, really. But I guess maybe first talk about that aspect of incorporating your own body, which, you know, in this case is through the massage therapy.
Well, I asked him to polish his motorcycle, so it wasn't totally. Like in the making of the film, I wanted to highlight the sort of like tools of their trade. So the guy getting gelled up to do the stunt was the initial thing that I wanted to capture, and there was something like erotic about that process. But then also so that guy was a motorcycle stuntman. He did motorcycles and horses, and he didn't have a horse to take care of. So I wanted to see him like taking care of his instrument, which was the motorcycle. And then, you know, I was thinking about work and like bodies and the tools for working. So yeah, I had a hard time. Like all of my other films, I feature myself pretty prominently in, as a way of kind of like reminding viewers that it's a subjective expression of, you know, it's my subjectivity, what you're seeing on screen, and sort of like trying to, I like to say, like, I don't want to ask anything of my subjects that I wouldn't be willing to do for my own work. And I think this kind of goes back to your question about vulnerability. Like I think I don't really think of myself as a director so much as more of like an observer. So in a lot of ways, I make myself sort of submissive to my subjects. And some people respond to that, like people who like to talk respond to that, and others don't. And I feel like it was kind of a mixed bag actually with these guys. Some of them were like, you're a director, like direct me. While others were just happy to.
But it's a weird, I mean, it introduces a really weird tension in this film, I think, you know, because you can tell, like, yeah, some of them are trying to sort of keep you out or aren't interested in you getting so close. And then there's the really incredible sort of intimacy with the massage therapy guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one, I don't know. I mean, it is his job. So it was like, it was kind of the only way I could figure out to get myself in the movie beyond just like answering some of their questions when they directly addressed me. Because like that, you know, I was standing in for his work basically. Yeah. And I mean, I think like something about what I said about being submissive to my subjects, like that kind of is related to masculinity and femininity and, you know, and like what kind of respect you get using that tactic. And I think it's a queer tactic in a lot of ways, like transgressing some kind of supposed power arrangement. So yeah, to like ask someone who I wanted to be in my film to touch my body on camera felt like a transgressive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We were talking before we came on about the, you know, I think for me, there are these particular moments in the film and things that they say that right now are almost painful to hear. And one of them was, I forget which guy it is, maybe the motorcycle guy or the guy on the phone says, you know, have you ever been on fire before? He's asking you. And I found it sort of excruciating because, you know, now we're in this moment where we're seeing, you know, images of lynching, essentially, you know, of bodies in extreme trauma, Black bodies, and not only, but I was just thinking about almost the privilege of choosing to be set on fire, you know, and which led me to think about what we were talking about before about the whiteness in the film, you know, obviously the whiteness of the subjects, but somehow the culture of these guys, which seems to me to be, I mean, I don't know much about it. I'm sure there are many Black stuntmen, but there is a kind of whiteness about the culture of those guys and Hollywood, of course. And you were talking about that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think actually that question was, he was talking about being in an audition and being asked if he'd ever been set on fire.
Oh, okay.
And he had been set on fire, but it wasn't voluntary. It was in a fire because his helicopter was crashing.
Oh yes, right. I think I got so freaked out by the quote that I just didn't even listen or something.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
really crazy if he asked me
Yeah.
that. I wish he had asked me that. But yeah, I mean, I think that was one thing like that I was interested in. Like all of those guys enlisted, so they chose to put their bodies in harm's way.
Mhm.
But then they doubled down on that choice, I guess, by becoming stuntmen after leaving the military. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, like I was definitely thinking about like white masculine American masculinity for sure in making this film, and not necessarily like attacking or deconstructing it so directly, but like I guess challenging it in a way by showing their vulnerability or trying to get at their vulnerability. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, there's a long history of racism in Hollywood and in the stunt world for sure.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
like,
and the perpetuating of in Hollywood of these, of these violence. I mean, through imagery, that then we ship out to the entire world. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and this film was specifically supposed to be about veterans, but and the connections between cultural imperialism and like military imperialism, and like the bodies that kind of just get thrown into that equation. But I did want to kind of expand beyond that into a longer film. So, and I imagine, like you talk about representation, like who are Black stuntmen playing? Like are they playing the leading man or are they playing the bad guy who gets killed by the Law and Order cop?
Right.
And actually, there's organizations. There's an organization specifically for Black stuntmen because it was so segregated up until 70s or something like that. So there's like organizations that were formed specifically to address that issue. But yeah, I mean, who's doing stunts in movies? Like who's the action hero?
Right.
That's a good question. But I wanted actually to find female veterans who were stunt women and people of color who were veterans and stuntmen when I expanded it into a longer film that never got made. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions here, and I want to just again encourage the audience to just pull up the chat, and you can put a question into the chat, and we will it will then be texted to me, and I will read it to Mariah. So please, audience, do share your thoughts with us. So there's a question here: how do you determine if a project is an installation work, multi-channel, or more traditional narrative form? Do you know this before you begin a project, or does each work determine its own form?
I think each work kind of determines its own form in a way. This one I was like, this will be my big normal Hollywood documentary, which it didn't turn out to be. So yeah, why did I make this one it's actually a single channel film, but it's split screen. And I had thought about installing it so that like the burn happens on a different wall and then syncing it all up, but it didn't really seem actually necessary to do that for this project.
I think the simplicity of it is so great, actually, really powerful.
But I mean, I think a lot of the times I'll think I'm making a single channel film and then I'll discover something in my research or like in my process of making the film that seems to call for further investigation or like to be sketched out in like a physical way. So like with Other and Father and during the making of Trouble, there wasn't room for like an 11-minute 16mm reenactment in Trouble. But like I thought that the way that the two projections mirrored each other and the way the viewer had to position themselves relative to them was like interesting in a different way than what I would be able to do in a single channel film.
Yeah. And Trouble was also more or less feature length. I mean, and it sort of circulated in festivals that way, right? And I was asking you earlier if that's something that interests you, that scale, which is really different. I mean, that thing is sort of epic scale almost. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like the length. I like working in a longer scale because I can weave in more threads.
Mhm.
Um, but the festival audience thing, like I did want to sort of like increase my visibility in like a more normative film world, mostly so that I could get more widen my funding base. um, but in terms of audience, like I don't necessarily like think of my audience while I'm making the film. I mean, I think about them, how they'll respond to the film, and how I can communicate what I want to communicate. But I don't think of them as like an art audience or a film audience.
Yeah.
An intellectual audience or a uneducated audience. So yeah, that doesn't really factor into like how I make
Yeah.
stuff.
I
But
feel
yeah, I'm
like
surprised at how Trouble's done at festivals.
I kind of am too, just because it's so, I mean, I think it's an amazing work. I really, I would like to see it again actually now, but I've seen it twice, I think. But I'm surprised how it crossed over, because it is still very much, it's so performative. I mean, it's so, yeah, and your presence in it is so important, I guess. And the way you play with the narrative and with the drag and inhabiting your father, and that it goes back and forth in time and everything. It's very, yeah, it's very, not that it's not traditional. I mean, it's just not a traditional
Yeah.
format, and it seems much more for an art audience than it does a regular film audience to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one it kind of is for, I don't know. I feel like a lot of artists are conscious of their audience and like directing their work towards a specific
Yeah.
audience. I don't think I do that. I think I'm more like interested in who wants to sit and watch it,
Mhm.
and discovering who that is. So I was really surprised with the Trouble stuff. Like it just got into like regular documentary festivals.
Yeah,
Like an
yeah, and it's so not
anti-documentary.
I mean,
Yeah.
I suppose it is in some manner a documentary, but it has a relationship to that BBC film, which was,
Yeah.
it sort of begins with a documentary, but it really just begins with your own personal narrative too.
Yeah.
Um, I have a question about, do you have you mentioned a few times that you were originally going to expand Full Burn. Is that something that you think you'll go back to, or no?
I would. I mean, I don't have any active plans to do that at the
Mhm.
moment, but yeah, I would totally do that. I would love to do that because there's lots of different ways that the military and Hollywood intersect. There's trainers, there's consultants, like a lot of veterans consult on like how you hold a gun, and then there's like Navy SEALs who like will train Zac Efron or whatever so that he walks right. And
Mhm.
like the masseuse guy was like, you can tell by the way someone moves whether they were a Navy SEAL, or he was a Navy SEAL, that guy.
Wow.
Yeah, he was like, you can tell who's a SEAL by the way they move.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, you can tell who is a dancer by the way they move.
yeah,
It's the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. And I feel like there's something queer about that too. Like,
Yeah.
if they can clock each other at a party or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, but
Can you tell us anything about your upcoming projects? I know you have a couple of shows, but what are the new film projects?
I'm working on two, and I'm kind of, I don't know, taking my time, as you could say, figuring out how to approach them. One is a multi-channel installation. So this one I know from the start is not suitable for like a just single channel film. And it's taking this book A by Andy Warhol. Do you know that book?
Uh-huh.
So it's transcripts of all of his tape recordings of his friends, and using that as a script, and kind of like trying to figure out what the contemporary like analog of Warhol's scene would be. So it's kind of like a mixture, but it's all queer. So not that Warhol's scene wasn't all queer, but it wasn't 100%. So it'd be kind of like a mixture of people in my immediate community who are artists and sort of like a wider, more vulnerable LGBT community that like is sort of facing the threat of erasure under, well, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling the other day.
It's
Less
amazing,
vulnerable.
right?
But yeah.
We have to have a moment, yeah, to talk about that. It's
Yeah.
so hopeful. Fantastic.
Yeah, but so I wanted to find people who were like interested in performing in different ways, who like might not be artists or
Hmm.
you know might not have the resources, and then also pay them. $50 an hour is what I came up with, so like a decent wage for showing up. And yeah, so then like conversations would be like installed on different screens in a space, and then the other one is my great aunt was a composer, and she was also a spiritualist. And she lived in Cairo from like 1924 till she died in 1960, and believed that ancient spirits dictated this opera to her that is 700 pages long and would take 4 days to perform. So I want to make a project that kind of like takes the opera sort of like as the launch point to look at the intersections between colonialism, like self-help culture, or spirituality, like modern Western spirituality that's influenced by Eastern philosophy, and mental illness and art making. So that's a huge project that's going to take forever, and I don't really know how to start on that one, but yeah.
That sounds fantastic. She wrote it? She wrote this out?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, she dedicated her whole life to it, and she bought this like bust of a pharaoh at some kind of flea market or something in Cairo, and believed that it told her all this stuff. And she's got these
Fantastic.
she's got all these, show them to you, hold on one sec.
Wow.
That's her vocal score, but she took all these notes and did all these like automatic drawings, and then she typed all of them up, like all of her visions that she had are all like typed in these weird.
My God, Mariah, that's crazy.
I know, it's insane. It's like
That's amazing.
Yeah, but
You
it was
make that.
like them saying, you know, this, you do important work and don't worry about it, the money will come. So yeah, I guess all artists need someone to tell them that.
Right.
Yeah. And then she made all these weird drawings.
Oh, wow.
This is from 1927 to 1931.
Oh my God, that's really, you have to make that piece. That's really special.
Yeah, that's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been kind of tentatively starting on that because it is very dense and I don't understand what she's talking about most of the time.
Yeah. Let me give you a couple last questions. Just going back to Full Burn.
Right.
Were you in any way trying to find similarities between yourself and your subjects, which you've already mentioned a little bit, and why do you think that urge or motivation was important to you?
Well, I think generally just in life, one of my favorite things is to kind of connect with people that I wouldn't necessarily expect to connect with.
Yeah.
And I use my work as an excuse to do that most of the time.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to say that because I think that's really important. That's a sort of a core thing to the work, I think, to the practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like finding not necessarily common ground, but like having an experience that makes me feel somewhat close to someone that I wouldn't really get to talk to otherwise. So yeah, I mean, that's not even just about the work. That's just my personality, I guess. What was the rest of that question?
Well, there's that was it. And then there's just a question about did any of the subjects see the film
Mhm.
at the Hammer or elsewhere, and how did they feel after seeing themselves portrayed in such a manner? Were they self-conscious about their vulnerability or appearing vulnerable?
Yeah, they did see it. I sent a link out to some of them, and then sent invitations to the opening. And I don't think any of them made it to the opening, but they did go see it at the Hammer. Some of
Oh,
them.
that's great.
Yeah. So, or like at least the guy who got set on fire, and some people from his company went. Um, the only feedback I got was like, "Full burn is awesome." So, yeah, I feel like also in my films I don't want to put anything on screen that I feel like they wouldn't want on screen. Like there's stuff that got talked about on camera that they were like, some of them were like, I don't want that in the film, and I didn't put it in.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of the ethics, right? The ethics of making the document.
Yeah, like I mean, I know that there's like, I feel like there's this gotcha journalism tradition of documentary making, which I'm really not into.
Mhm.
But I also feel like the weird pressure to like perform that or like get something. I don't know, like just generally not like when I go into a project, like I feel like there's like this expectation that documentary filmmakers will like uncover something.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think what I'm trying to uncover is like not something that would upset, not like I don't want to uncover the secrets of the subjects in the film. You know, it's
Yeah.
more about the connection between me and them, and that's what I'm trying to uncover, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I thankfully don't think I've had an experience ever with a subject who was, uh, you know, upset about the film.
Mhm. Well, Mariah, thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thanks for
Yeah,
inviting me.
thanks for talking. And I was going to ask you, as I said earlier, if there's anyone just sort of concluding we've been trying to kind of highlight and amplify other organizations, at this moment that are doing social justice work. Black Lives Matter, connected, of course, to supporting Black lives. But also, it's Pride, and the Supreme Court did what it did this week. And I don't know if there's anyone you want to talk about or kind of give a shout out to.
Well, some of the organizations I've been supporting this
Yeah.
month are National Bailout. They're doing great work. Actually, my partner did a whole postcard campaign to raise money for them.
Oh, great.
May. Yeah, and then the Laundromat Project in New York is doing some really great work for artists. And Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, and obviously Black Lives Matter LA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah, I mean, leading into this conversation, I was thinking about trying to find some organizations that might be like relevant to this particular film. And there's an organization called National Association for Black Veterans. So yeah, it's funny, like the aesthetics of that organization are so different from like all the other social justice organizations that I've been kind of following and supporting, because it's like tied into military service. So like the aesthetics are very militarized, but it's an organization that supports Black veterans and represents them in Congress, and
Yeah.
has like different
And recovery, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and like does interim housing, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
they're worth a look.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, what we'll do is maybe we can highlight a couple of those on our social media.
Yeah.
We've been doing that and just giving people information and links and kind of pointing to the work that those organizations are doing. So we'll do that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also Southern Poverty Law Center and Sylvia Rivera Law
Always.
Project are always.
What was the second one?
Sylvia Rivera Law Project in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks for doing this. Yeah. Great opportunity to see the film again.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Mariah.
Thanks.
Take care.